Welcome back to the Vanessa G Fitcast. I'm Vanessa Pozos, and here with me is my lovely co-host, Mr. Omar Pozos. And today, we're going to be diving into a topic that I actually presented on at our recent Forever Fit client retreat. And this was one I really enjoyed presenting on, and I found that our clients received a ton of value from. I've actually received a ton of messages even since then of clients putting this into practice and seeing the changes that this has really made in their lives. So I figured, you know what, I want to bring this to our podcast listeners and even to, you know, our clients who listen to the podcast who weren't able to make it to the retreat. And then of course, for our clients who were at the retreat and maybe want to be able to refer back to this as that little refresher as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into this. I think when it comes to emotional regulation and just getting an understanding of what you can control, what maybe might be out of your control, and just getting crystal clear on those gives you, if anything, I feel like I'm weird when I say this, but having more structure or having like a framework of navigating through some of this stuff gives me more freedom so that I know, what to focus on and what I don't have to focus on, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, structure creates freedom, and we are big on frameworks around here.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to kick this off with a little bit of a story. So back in July of 2022, Omar and I, we were actually visiting his family in South Carolina. And this was when I really found myself feeling like I had hit, honestly, I want to say rock bottom. It felt like I was in this place where I was just completely at the mercy of my own emotions. I had really just started my hormone healing journey. My sex hormones and my cortisol were really out of whack to where it felt like I just was low energy and negative all the time. And because of just these feelings that were just all the time, didn't matter if one day I woke up feeling okay, but then, maybe an hour later I started to feel down. It just seemed like the whole day was gone from me. I just felt like I was completely on this roller coaster of like, oh, here we go. It's going to be a bad day and this sucks. And it just felt like everything would completely turn into a bust. So at this point, this was early July when we went to go visit your family. And ironically, this was actually a week before we got engaged. And I honestly, when we were leaving, I wasn't sure if we were going to be leaving together. That was probably the most we had fought ever in our relationship. And we're really not fighters. It's funny that people will even say that sometimes. Like, I feel like you guys never fight.
Yeah.
Like we aren't ones who really often get into any like disputes in our relationship. But this was a point in time where I felt like we had hit a really low point, and it really was all coming back to me and my inability to regulate my own emotions. And so at this point in time, I had actually scheduled a call with a friend of mine. At the time, she was just a friend. We had worked together a little bit professionally before with me having my own coaching business, her having her own life and mindset coaching business. We had collaborated a little bit here and there, but she was a good friend. And I found myself reaching out to her and saying, like, I need help. I need to work with you. I want to become your client. So we scheduled a call. This was while I was still in South Carolina. And I hopped on this call with her and I just broke down to her. And I just poured out how I just felt like I just feel so stuck. I don't feel like I can show up as a business owner right now. I definitely don't feel like I can show up in the fitness and nutrition space. I just feel almost like a fraud because I just feel like I am just not the person I want to be right now. I don't feel like I can pursue any goals. I don't feel like I can push myself. I don't even know if I can trust myself to show up daily. And now it's affecting my relationship. And I felt miserable. And so this was when she actually first introduced to me a concept, and essentially what she taught me loosely within this call. This was something where we started to work together and really started to dive a lot more deeper into this type of concept. But essentially, she told me on that call that, Vanessa, you can't change your hormones. You cannot change your hormones in this moment. You cannot change what is happening in your body, what is happening in your life around you. But you can gain healthy control back, and you can get your power back by building awareness of how you are actually creating your own reality through your thoughts. And by shifting how you are thinking about your situations and your circumstances, you can get your power back and you can start to feel better more of the time. And so the concept that she taught me and that we went on to learn, it really did change my life. Even just being introduced to this changed my life instantly. And I really, over a year and a half later now, and still working with her one-on-one, it really all has completely changed my life. And it's something I've brought well into our own coaching practices, and it's something we work with now on our clients. And so I'm really excited to bring this to our podcast listeners today as well.
Yeah. And I hope, if anything, you guys, as Vanessa was saying, I've been lucky enough to now have an opportunity to work with Leslie myself. And as we start to dive and learn into, like Vanessa was saying, how our thoughts are really what we're thinking about the situation, how we're navigating that, really has such a big impact on how we come out on the other side of it. And I just want to take a second, Vanessa, for the people that are out there that are feeling stuck, that are feeling, low energy, stress, like their body's just stuck in the same cycle of maybe losing, regaining the same weight over and over, or maybe they're working themselves to death in the gym. Maybe they're eating very little, but yet their body just does not respond for XYZ reason. Like, this is the stuff of mental, or this is the mental mindset work that we need to work on first and foremost before we can dive into anything else. Because I feel like sometimes people are like, oh, it's a physical transformation. It's I just want my body to look this way, but it's such a big component of that is the mindset part of it, right? What happens in between your ears. And that's something that I feel like nobody really talks about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we're diving into this. So we're going to cover today why you feel overwhelmed, why maybe you feel out of control when it comes to your body or your work or your just life as a whole. We're going to talk about what to do when you have spiraling thoughts. We're going to talk about what to do with negative emotions. And we're going to talk about how to create more peace in your day-to-day life, because I know everybody ultimately is seeking that feeling of peace.
Man, this is so powerful because, so many people are so quick to be just like, oh, let me just take an antidepressant. Let me take this or let me take that. And I'm not taking anything away from that because I've never struggled with any of that stuff myself, so I can't speak upon that. But if you can learn how to do this stuff, within your own self and working on yourself without depending on a supplement or a pill or whatever. I mean, think about how powerful that whole process can be,
Absolutely. Well, so let's, to explain this concept a little bit, I want to take you back to when you were in elementary school. And think about when you were maybe a little girl or a little boy and you were on the playground and you were running around having a great time playing with your friends.
I was playing tag, just tagging everybody, like, you're it.
Yeah, you were Omar, just like pushing the other kids down, slamming them into the mulch, telling them that they're it now. And now you're just having a great time. And suddenly that mean girl, Sally, in your class just comes running up to you and she points at your shoes.
That bitch, Sally.
She points at your shoes and she says, Your shoes are ugly.
Ugh.
Yeah. And so you hear this comment, your shoes are ugly, and you just immediately burst into tears. You run to your teacher and you are just a mess. You are just crying, you're sobbing, and you can't even really quite explain what actually happened to your teacher. You're just like crying. But, luckily your teacher actually overheard what happened. She heard what that mean girl Sally said to you. And so your teacher turns to you and says, oh, did Sally hurt your feelings? And that right there, whether or not this exact situation happened for you as a kid, situations like this probably happened to you at some point when you were in a very, formidable age, when in adults, not in any way like meaning bad, but adults often would tell you things like, Sally hurt your feelings. And that might have been the first time that you internalized this concept that your feelings are actually out of your control, that somebody else can make you feel a certain way. And what others say, what others do, that actually determines how you feel. And so then as we got older and we started to continue to have more and more of these experiences, we were just again and again learning that our feelings are completely outside of our control. Maybe that teacher said, she hurt your feelings, but maybe you found yourself now in high school and you're on a date and then you're dating this guy, but then you go and you're with your friends and you see it now he's on a date with another girl and your friends turn to you and you're
an
like,
asshole, that guy.
They're like, God, he is the worst. And they're like, he broke your heart, didn't he? And now you're crying over that. Maybe when you got a little bit older, you even were trying to learn some skills of, okay, how to handle relationships, how to handle discourse. And so you tell somebody of like, hey, it really hurt me when you said that. All of these are instances of us verbalizing this concept that other people are causing our feelings. That when your first boyfriend in high school cheated on you, that was what broke your heart, that he made you, through that action, made you feel a certain way. That when somebody else said something, it made you feel a certain way. Over and over again, we keep creating this idea and this belief that others are making us feel a certain way. Nowadays, as adults, we'll find ourselves just absolutely living, believing that this is the truth and saying things like, oh man, I got home from work and I went to my husband and I was like, oh God, it was such a hard day at work. My coworker just really frustrating me. God, she frustrates me so much. Maybe we say like, oh, my boss just really made me feel stupid today. So now I'm really hurt. Maybe they're like, my husband just really keeps pissing me off. Like, gosh, I hate my husband. But no.
Why do you look at me when you say that?
I was waiting for your reaction.
Well, I was looking at the screen and then you turned to me. I was like, my husband pissed me off. I was like, what did I do?
No, you're perfect.
Thanks.
But these are just loose examples of us actually putting into words this idea that everybody else is creating our feelings, is making us feel a certain way by what they're doing and what they're saying. And so what's happening is we're putting ourselves on this emotional roller coaster where it doesn't feel very good. 1 second we're like, woo, I'm happy. And then suddenly it's like something happens that's outside of our control and boom, now we're sad. Or maybe then something else happens. So now we're excited. Things are great. But then, now somebody said something and now I, feel depressed. Or maybe now something happened with work and now I'm overwhelmed, and we're just constantly just riding this roller coaster, never knowing what's around the next turn, what it's going to feel like. We just feel like we're along for the ride, right?
And I just want to say too, I think, based on your examples, like this stuff goes back to when we were little, we were in the playground, we were, I don't know, dating or in college or in high school, whatever that is, now to our age where we're full grown adults, if you guys are, at that age of your life. But what I want to say is, this stuff has happened so quickly and has been so ingrained into our minds that it's totally normal for not like, I don't want people to go back like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, of course, because you're supposed to be doing this because this is what you've been taught throughout your whole life, right? So I think number one, it starts with that awareness and recognizing like, oh my gosh, maybe I am putting way too much control or giving too much control to others on how I feel or how I respond to things. And I think that awareness, number one, you're like, oh, maybe there is something that I could do about it. And I think for me, that has been the biggest game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. By building that awareness, now essentially you're getting the power to get off that roller coaster ride and essentially start to engineer your own roller coaster. Like you really can actually gain healthy control over how you feel and how you experience life. And that's essentially what we're going to teach you today.
I mean, what's
episode.
The saying? It's like you can't change what you're not even aware of, right?
Yep, exactly. So in order to go about this, in order to essentially engineer our own roller coaster, to gain our healthy control back and really have that same shift that I had going from being that person back in July of 2022 who was just an absolute emotional mess to today feeling like I am very emotionally regulated and I'm able to teach this concept to many of our clients, our team, and help everybody else experience lives that they in a way that they want to experience them. So in order to do that, it starts by first taking responsibility for how we feel. So we've been delegating that responsibility, saying that others are causing us to feel a certain way. We need to take that responsibility back and recognize that we are in control because it is actually our thoughts that create our feelings, not others' actions or inactions that are creating our feelings.
I think that one's going to sting a little bit with people, and it's supposed to, because I guess, like you said, Vanessa, when you start to give the responsibility or give the control to yourself, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's not what Vanessa's saying, it's not what Sally is saying, it's not what my boyfriend is saying, it's how I'm perceiving these things that makes the biggest difference. People are going to be like, I don't know how I feel about this.
Yeah.
At least for me, it makes me feel sometimes a little uncomfortable because I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But it comes back to maybe I shouldn't have done this, or I shouldn't have, whatever. Not what Vanessa was saying or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It really can sting a little bit when we start to build this awareness of like, oh man, like I can't just now complain about my life making me feel this way anymore.
I think
realize
it's fun
that
to kind of dwell sometimes. Not that it's helpful, but it's at least I don't know. It feels like you're relieving some of that stress, some of that tension when you're just dwelling in things.
Yeah, it can feel good to just complain about how we feel and complain about how we feel in a way of placing blame externally. But when we can take that responsibility, it really does give us a lot of power. So it's like, you were saying before of even referencing back, okay, it wasn't Sally that made us feel that certain way. Another way to think about this is, the reality is that in that situation, when Sally said your shoes are ugly, if you were like, I'm not even wearing shoes right now, like you'd be like, Sally's crazy. Obviously, that's not true. And you wouldn't be feeling that certain way because you're thinking differently about the situation. Nothing in the circumstance changed. She still told you that but you're thinking differently now, which is causing you to feel a certain way. A more like easier way to put this into a concept is like similar idea. If somebody came up to you and said, you know, your hair is ugly, but if they said, hey, Omar, your pink hair is ugly, you'd be like, I don't have pink hair, so like I don't really know what this girl's saying, and I feel completely unaffected by this.
Yep.
And
I'd be like, what drugs did you take this morning?
yeah, exactly. You might even be like in your thoughts being like, this person is so crazy, and you might be laughing now, and you might actually then be having the feeling of just like happiness, almost, of like, gosh, I had just like the funniest morning of this girl came up and told me my pink hair was ugly.
Yeah.
But if you are walking around and a girl comes up to you and is like, your brown hair is really ugly, your haircut's really ugly, that might be a part of you that actually now believes her thought to be true, because you do in fact have brown hair and you do have a haircut. So you might be thinking
a great
about
haircut,
her.
might I add? I'm kidding.
You might be thinking about her comment differently now, which is creating a feeling of sadness or whatever feeling for you is coming up from that. So again, her statement has nothing to do with how you feel. Your thoughts about her statement is what is making you feel that way.
Wow.
And this really does apply to any situation. You know, your significant other doing something or not doing something isn't making you feel a certain way. It's your thoughts about what your significant other is doing or is not doing that is making you feel that certain way. And when we do start to take responsibility for how we feel in these situations, we really do start to feel better more of the time, because it puts us in the driver's seat. It puts us back in that state of healthy control. And that healthy control is what is going to lead to better actions. And those actions are going to lead to better results, better, just essentially better outcomes that does change how we experience our lives. So we can put this into a model. And now this is the model that our mindset coach...
I feel like I need a drum roll here. Or whatever.
Yeah, so this is the model that our mindset coach Leslie taught us, and what I taught during this retreat as well. And to be clear, really everything within this presentation is all stuff I've learned from Leslie. I am taking no credit for creating any aspect of this. This is everything that she has taught me and how she has changed our lives. You know, we've had her on the podcast twice before. Definitely go back and listen to those episodes. But essentially, this model that she taught us is called the CTFAR model. And what that stands for is circumstance, thought, feeling, action, result. And now if you're listening to this, I want you to visualize a CTFAR written in a vertical format: C above T, above F, above A, above R.
When you said vertical, I was like, that's up and down, right? So yes, CTFAR.
Yes, good job. You win for visualization today,
you know what?
Omar.
Your thoughts about me are not going to control me today. How about that?
But what this model is teaching us is everything in our life is a product of what we are thinking, what we are feeling, and what we are doing. Every result, every outcome ties back from that thought, feeling, and action. Incidentally, we always very quickly think that it's actually the circumstance that creates the result. Or even we might say the circumstance creates the feeling and the feeling creates the result. We completely miss out on that thought line. And this is where a lot of us get stuck. So the reality is circumstances are never actually a certain way. Like a circumstance is never inherently challenging, for example. What makes a circumstance challenging is the way you think about it. And think about the fact that even one person might look at one circumstance and be like, that looks terrible, that is challenging. And now they're creating these thoughts about this is so terrible, this is so horrible. And now they're having these thoughts of just dread or, whatever these really negative thoughts. Somebody else might see the exact same circumstance and might be like, this is so exciting. Yeah. This is amazing. I can't wait.
Can I give a quick example of one that just happened to us the other day?
Yeah.
So we actually, funny enough, just drove to South Carolina this past weekend to see my family again. And as we were driving, I was busy working and being very focused on the road.
He was working as he was driving. Did anybody catch that
Anyways, I missed the exit to go home, and it added probably another 45 minutes to the trip. So, that's the circumstance right there. It is a matter of fact, that's what happened. I missed the exit. So instead of us or me jumping into the feeling of frustration and being like, oh my God, I'm so upset that now it's another 45 minutes and being mad and being pissed off about the whole situation and letting those thoughts affect my feelings, I honestly actually was kind of indifferent about it, because I was like, well, you know what? it helped me connect with you a little bit more because we were in the car a little bit more. We were able to listen to a couple podcasts. We got so much good out of that situation. And for another extra 45 minutes, it didn't make or break the whole trip. But it's that circumstance never changed. It was the feelings around it, the thoughts around it that made me feel indifferent about it as opposed to being upset or being pissed off about it, or just being frustrated with the whole circumstance. Yeah. So I think that was a good action or a good example of, I'm like, oh, okay, like this isn't as bad as I thought it would have been or as I would have reacted in the past.
Exactly. Yeah. Because if we're thinking very negatively about any one circumstance, that circumstance, for example, of like, oh, missed the exit, we're behind schedule. Like there's a lot of ways you could think about that. And the facts are, like, factually, that circumstance is that we missed the exit and drove an extra, 30 minutes. Now those are just the facts. If we now think negatively about that, what we're doing is we're just compounding the negativity by adding more just layers of hard and negativity on top of it. So now we're experiencing it more and more negatively, completely due to our own thoughts. Like we are creating that reality of like this being so, sucky, like, oh man, now I'm in the car forever. I'm creating that reality for myself because of the way I'm thinking about this circumstance. So for example, like back when I was in that state in July of 2022, when I just felt like I was all over the place, I would, wake up some days with brain fog and wake up with really low energy. And I might find myself thinking things like, oh gosh, this is just debilitating. And, I'm not going to be on my game. And, essentially I would end up having these thoughts that were creating these outcomes that I didn't like. But instead, what I was learning through this process is, how can I think differently about this situation? And the way that these circumstances ended up playing out, the way that the result ended up playing out, would be night and day different depending on how I was thinking about it. So using the CTFAR model is a way for us to slow down and actually train ourselves to observe our own thoughts about our mind and practice observing what we're creating for ourselves. And again, as we create that awareness, we're gaining back that healthy control to realize like, oh, I'm actually in control here. I can think differently if I choose to think differently here, or if nothing else, I can at least be aware of the fact that I'm creating my reality, and that will help me think differently about it as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing right there, Ness, is, at the end of the day, the situation is what it is, and you're not going to be able to fix something, whether it's hormones or weight loss or something, overnight. So we might as well think about the situation, have other thoughts around it that are going to empower us, that are going to help us get out of this situation faster than instead of dwelling it and just feeling miserable. Because at the end of the day, the situation's not going to change.
Yeah, exactly. So let's put this into practice here.
Yeah,
so
give an example.
Using the CTFAR model, the way that I would use this is either in the moment when I find myself feeling a way that I don't like, I just don't like how this is feeling. I don't like how I'm experiencing my current circumstance. I can, like I said, slow down and essentially maybe grab a piece of paper or put this in like the notes in my phone, get it out of my head and actually write out the C, the T, the F, and the R, the circumstance, the thought, the feeling, the action, and the result. So typically for myself, and I find this for a lot of women, so really the clients we work with, our team, typically I encourage people to start with the feeling, because that's typically, as women, we're most in tune with how we feel. We're very much like in our bodies, and we can very much be in tune with like, God, I feel XYZ, I feel XYZ. So in these kinds of circumstances, for example, when I was finding myself in my hormone healing journey, frequently waking up with low energy, with, just a lot of brain fog, that's the circumstance. I woke up this morning with low energy and brain fog. So as I'm filling this in, I can put the circumstance is I woke up this morning with brain fog and low energy. That is a factual circumstance. Now for me, it's probably easiest for me to start with the feeling at this point, because I can take a step back and be like, okay, how am I feeling right now? I'm like, I'm feeling frustrated. Okay, so I'm going to write that in and say, okay, the F is frustrated. Now I can start to fill in those other pieces, the thought, the action, and the result. So for me, what I'm doing is I'm looking at, okay, if this is the factual circumstance that I'm currently experiencing, and this is how I'm feeling, what am I thinking right now about this circumstance to create this feeling for myself? So when I asked myself, and this is actually a real example, this is one I shared in my presentation because I actually took this from my notebook during this period of time. I actually wrote this one out. So I had written out that circumstance, I'd written out that feeling. For me, the thought that I uncovered was that I was thinking, this is debilitating. And that thought happens so quickly. It happens so fast. I don't even notice when it's happening. I'm just suddenly noticing like, oh man, I'm frustrated and now this is terrible. But when I can slow down and write out this model, I can actually uncover, oh, I'm actually thinking about this and thinking this is debilitating. And that's making me feel frustrated. And then when I feel frustrated, the action I am taking at that point in time is I'm going to go and just like buffer on social media. I'm going to buffer that feeling because I don't really like how it feels to feel frustrated. So from that place of action or from that place of frustration, I am taking the action of pulling out my phone and just scrolling social media and just numbing myself. And that was a common one I would do during these times. But now when I'm taking that action of buffering that feeling by scrolling on social media, I'm creating this result of now factually I am behind on my work because I just spend much time on social media. Now I'm probably going down essentially a whole nother model because now me being behind on my work is I'm feeling a certain way or I'm thinking a certain way about that's creating these feelings of like guilt and shame and stress over essentially how I'm spending my time. I'm thinking about it like, gosh, this is so terrible. It's like that's this result that I'm creating at this point in time. So we can see by looking at this model how that circumstance, I was thinking about it a certain way that created this feeling, which ultimately created that result of me just being like, God, this is a terrible day. Instead, what I can do is ask myself, okay, this is the circumstance, but what if there's another perspective here? What if there's another way I can think about this circumstance? So if I'm still experiencing that exact same circumstance that I woke up this morning with low energy and brain fog, now I can ask myself, what is another way I can think about this that still feels true to me? And I want to emphasize here that the goal is not to go from like the bottom of the ladder of negativity all the way up to the top of the ladder to like, now I'm having this really positive thought and I'm just like, oh man, life is great. Like, yeah, I have brain fog, but like, I'm lucky to be alive. Like, I'm not going to be choosing a thought like that because the reality is that thought, like, even though yes, I'm like, okay, yeah, I am lucky to be alive. It just doesn't really feel right for me in that moment. What I'm doing in this situation when I am reframing the CTFAR is I am choosing another thought that still feels very true and believable for me in this moment, but leads to a slightly better feeling that I can actually now take a better action from that actually creates a better result for me. So in this instance, the example that I showed, again, this was a model that I did back over a year ago. I reframed my thought to being, my body is telling me that it needs rest. That thought is like, yeah, that feels very true for me. I agree with that. And like, I can tell myself that of like, I can actively choose that thought of my body is telling me it needs rest. I had the automatic thought of this is debilitating, but now I'm choosing a new thought of my body is telling me it needs rest. And when I thought that thought, the feeling it created for me was just simply tired. Like I just feel like, gosh, I feel tired right now. I don't feel frustrated anymore. Now I just feel tired. And when I feel tired, now I'm going to take an action from that of, let me just go lay down and rest a little bit. Maybe I probably should have slept in a little bit later than I did today. I need to just go get another hour of sleep. I go and lay down, I take that action, I rest. Now the result coming from that is very different from my previous result. Now my result is, less guilt, less shame, not resting so much. Now I can actually dive into work after that rest and feel more productive, get more things done, and have more energy ultimately towards the end of the day. So this is an example of how essentially in that moment when I found myself not liking how I'm currently experiencing my life, not liking though I'm currently feeling, I drew out a model of what was currently happening, and then I chose a new thought, and then I essentially took that thought on as basically like a mantra for myself, and then I was able to create that new result for myself.
Yeah. And again, I think for me, I always get stuck in the awareness part of this stuff, right? Because again, and I just looked this up on Google really quick, but we have 60,000 thoughts that come in and out of our brain every single day. So going back to our situation with our trip and me missing the exit, like if you're not taking into account, what exits you are taking, or you're not taking into account, what direction you're taking your life or your vehicle, whatever you want to call it, like we're going to end up in different areas. We're going to end up, in different destinations. So that's why slowing down, because of these 60,000 thoughts that we have that come in and out of our brain, and, with social media nowadays, you're so distracted, just taking a minute to be like, okay, this is my circumstance. This is how I'm feeling about it. What, like you said, without being like this toxic positivity person, like what changes can I make to help me better assess the situation or help me better just navigate this situation. And for you, if it was, as simple as like, instead of being frustrated with myself for feeling so low energy and, my brain fogginess and all that stuff, instead if I just tell myself like, I'm just tired and this is my body. We've talked about the triangle of health before, right? This is my body just telling me that I need to focus a little bit more on my health before I can perform and look aesthetically the way that I want to, then that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to get myself out of this, but without being so negative and so mean to yourself, if that makes any sense.